members who are descendants in the audience to please stand, introduce yourself, and just give us a quick snapshot of how you link into the family tree to our patriot. Peggy?
Oh, me first?
Yeah, may as well.
Okay, Charles Thurman, Frederick Wilder Thurman, James Walter Thurman, Martha Ellen Thurman, Hattie Beasley, and then my daddy and me.
My name is Ed Thurman. Charles is my fourth great grandfather, and that's it.
I'm Dolores right here. I joined the DAR under Charles Thurman. He is, let me see, how is he living? On my daddy's side, Mary Cordelia, William Thurman is his son.
Yeah.
Evander, mine's Evander Thurman.
Well, you know, yours goes to William, then Van.
Evander, then William, and then my dad and me. So.
I'll go next. I'm Walter Wilcoit, my sister Shirley. We are children of Maxine Music, who was the daughter of Willie Tollett, daughter of James Ebby Tollett, son of Martha Jane Thurman, daughter of John M. Thurman, son of John Thurman, who was the son of Charles Thurman.
He's our fifth great-grandfather.
Fifth great-grandfather. Thank you.
I'm Ken Thurman, I'm Ed's brother, fourth great-grandson of Charles Thurman to Frederick, to Billy Bill Fiddler Thurman.
William.
Elijah Anderson, James Obadiah, Leonard Thurman, and myself.
And I'm Danny Thurman, and Charles is my four-time great-grandfather.
I'm Carol Udart, and Charles is my fourth great-grandfather. And I come through a line from the Sherrills and Oxiers and the Thurmans all the way up to Charles. So.
Are we missing anybody? Or anybody that's a descendant that doesn't want to talk but's here?
She's my mom.
So it's same for you, but ditto.
Probably this one.
Yeah.
So you got Texas and Jersey, is that right?
North
Dakota.
North Dakota?
Oh, good for you.
Oh, wow. Thanks for making that trek.
Yeah, we drove, we flew. So. Our trip was the longest.
I would have needed a lot more help.
Yeah, found it. Go ahead.
He's my fourth.
Yeah, Texas is so big. You gotta say west, there's a big difference. Half our trip was driving across Texas.
There's one more wants to talk.
Okay, one more.
I'm Wayne Morgan. Charles Thurman's my fourth great-grandfather to William Thurman, and Charles Thurman, and John Thomas Thurman, and my mother was a Thurman. That's where it comes in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, family members, for turning out and traveling to be here together. It's an awesome thing. Having done about a dozen of these or so now, sometimes you don't see any descendants, so it's really awesome to have descendants of the Patriot present. And I'm going to present a service bio of what we think is likely what happened to Charles during the war. And as we go along, you'll see that you descendants probably acquired the Thurman traveling gene. In 6 February 1760, Charles Thurman was born in Buckingham County in the state of Virginia. So at the beginning of the Revolution, he was 16 years old. By the end of it, he was 23. Charles was first called to serve initially for a 3-month tour of duty in the Virginia militia under the command of Captain Thomas Red of the Buckingham County Militia. He was eligible for service when he was 15, And the notes on who he served under, as I go through the bio, are direct from his pension and their pensions. So we have kind of a good feel of who he said he served under, and then what those officers said their units did. The company was ordered to Albemarle Barracks, where it was employed in guarding Burgoyne's soldiers who were then prisoners of war. The company joined what was called the Convention Army Guard Regiment on about 25 October 1779. So how was this duty? A famous historian noted that life for the convention troops, that was prisoner of war, became more pleasant as they finished their cabins, built churches, planted gardens, cleared roads, and by June, for recreation, they had a hut which had a billiard table and a theater and a coffee house and a sutler store. So hearing all that, you'd think, well, gosh, POWs are doing pretty good. There were still major discomforts, and worse, which were the weather, rattlesnakes, and sporadic food shortages. In some respects, the men of the Guard Regiment, which would have been Charles's unit, suffered more than the prisoners. They went months without pay, fresh food, or essential clothing. On 8 April 1780, 121 were without shoes of any kind. And on July, it was reported that 38 of them were plain naked. Crockett's Western Battalion relieved the militia drafts in April 1780. And it's likely that Charles Thurman extended his duty voluntarily at the barracks till all the unit could be relieved. There's no real record of how the militia rotated out. At this time in the war, 29 May 1780, the Battle of Waxhaws happened, in which the Virginia Regiment under Colonel Abraham Buford suffered serious casualties. The militia were told to make up the loss. Charles volunteered and was under the command of Captain John Mosley and marched from Buckingham County to Petersburg, Virginia. Petersburg at that time was the Central Continental Army depot for supplies and training under General von Steuben. Captain Thomas Ewell was his company commander, and in a short time they marched to join Buford's reorganizing command. It's known that he enrolled specifically on 17 August 1780 in the 1st Virginia State Line, which was on the Continental Establishment. And it's kind of unique in Virginia. Virginia had its militia regiments, it had its state line regiments, it had state line on Continental Establishment Regiment, which could be sent out of state, that being the difference between its other state regiment. And it had its own Continentals. In 1780, numerous units were detached and sent south to plus up the Southern Army, then under the new commander, General Greene. It's highly likely that Ewell's company, also serving under Buford's command at this time, marched south to the Southern Army. 7 October came around in 1780, and that was the Battle of Kings Mountain. As Charles was marching south, that big battle happened, and in 26 December 1780, General Greene and part of the Southern Army arrived on the PD River near Cheraw, South Carolina. Charles and his unit at that time were moving toward them. Eventually, they linked up, and he spent some time on the PD in South Carolina. While all that was unfolding, and his unit was en route to reinforce the Southern Army, here's where you get your traveling gene, I'm pretty sure. Charles marched from Petersburg to Hillsborough, North Carolina, which is about 159 miles. We can drive it in 3 hours a day, but imagine the terrain back then, like this, if not worse. He then marched to Salisbury, North Carolina, another 103 miles, and then to Charlotte, another 53, and finally on to the South Carolina rally point, which was another 80 miles, for a total of 395 miles of marching on sandy roads out in the piney woods. Charles' unit joined Greene's command, and it's most likely with the reorganization ongoing of the Virginia line, he was reorganized to serve yet again in another company, commander's company. About this time, it's noted that he was under the command of Captain Webb, and Captain Isaac Webb's company at the time was called an 8 months company. They were one of a few Virginia units at the time, but the fact they were called 8 months company is because they were required to serve an additional 8 months for dropping their weapons and running away from the British at the Battle of Kenton. So Charles may not have been too happy being a young guy, eager to serve, having done a little bit of a mission, marched all that way, only to get put in a unit that may not have been too happy about being where they were. On 2 January 1780, Benedict Arnold raided Virginia. That necessitated a call-up of 1/4 of Buckingham County's militia. Charles, however, is now deployed as a Virginia Continental in South Carolina. 17 January, Battle of Cowpens happened. 19 January, the British start pursuing Morgan as he's trying to keep them away from Greene and the main army. On 30 January, Greene and Morgan joined their forces, and General Isaac Huger, who was directly subordinate to Greene, took what was called the main part of the army and moved off toward Salisbury to secure that supply depot. It's likely, although the pension statement's not exactly clear on how he went and started moving back toward Virginia, what part of the army he was with, most likely he was with the main part of the army, as that's where you found most of the Virginians at that time. But he definitely remained in the army, and he was part of the race for the Dan, which was critical to the Southern campaign. On 3 February, at Trading Ford at the Yadkin River, Brigadier General Stevens' Virginians in a rearguard action clashed with the British, and it's most likely Charles was involved in this skirmish. Greene's army then encamped at Guilford Courthouse as militia units traded out men coming and going as he tried to build his army up. On 10 March 1781, he had enough militia on hand, he figured he could offer battle to Cornwallis. On 14 March, Greene marched south toward Guilford Courthouse, preparing to fight Cornwallis. While that was going on, there was skirmishing to the south all the way between Lee's cavalry and Tarleton's cavalry along what is now called, or what then was called the New Garden Road, which actually becomes the road that bisects the Guilford Courthouse battlefield. The skirmishing led right into the actual battle on 15 March in 1781. Charles Thurman, his pension notes that he served under Captain Nathan Cunningham and fought at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. Nathan Cunningham's company was organized as part of Colonel Nathaniel Crock's militia battalion of Brigadier General Edward Stevens' 1st Militia Brigade. Now, the reason I mention all that, not just because I like knowing it, but if you go actually on the ground at the battlefield, you can take those units with their commanders and find their markers on the battlefield. So you might not be able to know exactly where he stood in the fight, but you'll be within 100 meters.
Wow.
Maryland's Colonel Arthur Williams recalled later that the Virginia Brigade, commanded by General Stevens and Lawson, gave the enemy so warm a reception and continued their opposition with such firmness, during which time the roar of musketry and crackling of rifles was almost perpetual, and is the heaviest as I've ever heard. It was a vicious battle which was fought with Colonel Crock's regiment and Colonel George Moffat's regiment being the British 71st Foot. The 71st Foot of the British were Highlanders. So they were a well-organized, well-disciplined regiment, and Charles's Virginia militia stood in there in the thick of it with them and gave as good as they got. The 71st had already been bloodied by the first line, but most loss was occurred when they fought the Virginians. The Guard of the British also took severe losses, and they were on the flank of the Highlanders. In short order, the Grenadier Guards Company lost all its officers, and the Guards 2nd Battalion lost half their company grade officers. General Stevens got wounded and gave his command the order to fall back. The Virginia militia south of the road went streaming to the rear. And it wasn't too far out of keeping of the plan of the day, as Greene tried to replicate Morgan's battle plan at Cowpens. So they were to give way at some point in the battle anyway. At the end of the second line fighting, the British Army was very weak and very tired, and their ammunition greatly diminished. And they had yet to face the fresh Continentals. Charles headed home after Guilford Courthouse, and in around April 1781, was discharged from Captain Thomas Ewell's company. However, not too long after that discharge, he decided he really wasn't done with service, and he signed up as a substitute for William Gowan and Captain John Mosley's company and marched to the siege of Yorktown, where he remained in service and served through the battle and siege of Yorktown. Siege of Yorktown officially began 19 September 1781 and ended 19 October 1781. Most of the Virginia militia was part of the intermediate American line on the left flank. So there again, if you visit Yorktown, you can go to that line, you can go to the left flank, and you can see the Virginia markers and know where he probably walked that ground some way, somehow. The 1st State Regiment was in that position. The Virginia militia during the siege were vital to extending the line, securing the left flank, and preventing the British from escaping that way or getting supplies that way. The militia performed numerous duties, including digging and extending the siege lines, protecting the supply line, which in this case was a huge herd of cattle, and performing general other local area security missions. Almost immediately after the surrender, Charles transferred back to Captain Nathaniel Cunningham's company, and they had the mission of guarding the prisoners and marching them off to the Winchester Barracks. He was finally discharged from service 7 November 1781. It's kind of interesting to note he began his official service guarding British POWs and ended his service doing the same. He eventually moved to Buckingham County, to Washington County, Virginia, and he lived in the neighborhood of the King's Salt Works for 16 years, then removed to Ray County, Tennessee, where he lived a year, and then on over into Bledsoe, where he lived for about 16 to 17 years before applying for his pension. And the descendants can tell us the rest. In traditional SAR, DAR fashion, we will present our wreaths for the organizations that are present. Representing Tennessee Society, Sons of the American Revolution, our Vice President, Fred Underdown. President of John Sevier Chapter, Brian Beck. And our ladies from the Chickamauga Chapter, DAR. I didn't miss a chapter, did I? Are all three ladies from the same chapter?
We are. You helped me out, you courtesy.
At this time, if I could have Eddie and Peggy Thurman come forward.
All right. With this unveiling, members of the Tennessee State Society, Southern District, and National Society of Sons of American Revolution dedicate this marker to the glory of God and in the recognition and in memory of Charles Thurman, patriot of the American Revolution. Yeah, just pull it apart there.
It's going to be me.
You're gonna be the commander?
It's going to be, no, I'm not the commander.
We're just gonna introduce the.
Oh, come on out, Phil. Traditionally, as part of our grave markings, the color guard members who have period weapons execute a musket salute. And
Had a mishap, it broke.
okay. I will be the firing musket today as a demonstrator, but good, Joel. Typically, our uniforms can be pretty much just about anything. Joel's in militia garb, which could really be anything, and I'm in Continental uniform, one of the prescribed Continental uniforms for some of the states. You could see others, like my Patriot ancestor was a Continental from New York in Malcolm's additional regiment, and they were clothed in a brown coat, blue facings, and blue vest. And typically we'll fire 3 volleys to give you an idea of what it kind of looks like, sounds like, and the fact that it's not a fast process. Joel's rifle is a rifle, so it's more accurate than my musket. And if we were, say, for instance, assigned to Morgan's Rifle Corps, you would see both of us potentially in Morgan's Rifle Corps. He being the rifleman, sharpshooter, detailed to take out key people. Me being the musket guy that has a bayonet to make sure he's safe. Okay.
Well put.
So we'll
You'll buy that one.
we'll buy that.
And I had a mishap, so I can't fire today. I broke my ramrod and
Well, that's gotta hurt.
That's all fun and games till you break your ramrod.
then you break your gun. But I could still hit people in the face.
He'll protect you.
I will pretend I'm more than one. But let's see.